Metal screamed against metal. The high-pitched grind of a power drill chewed through the deadbolt of my front door, sending violent vibrations straight up through the floorboards of my bedroom. It was exactly 6 o'clock in the morning. The mountain air outside my Asheville cabin was still pitch black and freezing, but the harsh glare of headlights blasted straight through my front windows. I shoved the blankets aside and stepped to the glass. A 26-foot moving truck sat backed right up to the edge of my porch, its heavy diesel engine still rumbling. My father crouched at my door, bearing his entire body weight into a cordless drill aimed directly at my smart lock. My mother huddled on the bottom step, violently sobbing into her hands, performing a hysterical family crisis for the benefit of the empty woods. 50 feet away, my sister sat parked in the driver's seat of a brand new leased luxury vehicle. She was bathed in the pale glow of her phone screen, casually scrolling while our father committed a felony on my doorstep. The invasion was officially underway. I stepped back from the cold glass. The heavy thud of my father kicking the bottom of the door frame echoed through the living room. For a fraction of a second, the sheer audacity of the ambush threatened to paralyze me. But the panic never came. Instead, a deep, glacial calm washed over my chest. I am 34 years old. I am an emergency room charge nurse. I spend 12 hours a day managing screaming trauma patients, navigating manipulative drug seekers, and making life or death decisions before my morning coffee. My parents throwing a violent tantrum on my porch did not intimidate me. It just exhausted me. As the drill spun again, whining against the reinforced steel plate I had installed last year, I thought about the blood and sweat it took to buy this cabin. I bought this property completely on my own. I survived on stale hospital cafeteria food and worked every night shift, holiday, and weekend for 6 straight years. Every plank of wood, every window, every square foot of this sanctuary belonged to my discipline. And out there, destroying my property, were the people who expected to take it from me for free. I knew exactly why they were here. 3 weeks ago, my extended family network exploded with a hushed, scandalous rumor that turned out to be entirely true. My parents, Derek and Catherine, had committed financial suicide. They secretly took out a predatory cash-out refinance on their fully paid-off home and liquidated their entire retirement account, taking the massive tax penalties without a second thought. They burned through $850,000 of hard cash. They did not spend this money on a medical emergency or a brilliant investment. They spent it to clear my sister Vanessa's catastrophic luxury debts and to act as the sole financial guarantors on a 5-year commercial lease for her new, completely fake influencer wellness retreat. Vanessa is 29 years old. She has never held a job for more than 6 months. She is a black hole of weaponized incompetence, entirely funded by my parents' delusional belief that she is just one business venture away from becoming a millionaire. Now, the money was gone. Their house was heavily mortgaged. Their accounts were empty. And they were legally anchored to Vanessa's failing business. Having bankrupted themselves for their golden child, they decided it was time for the responsible daughter to pay the tab. They expected me to surrender my master bedroom, absorb their living expenses, and act as their permanent, silent safety net. The heavy thud of a boot hitting my front door snapped my attention back to the present. My father's voice, thick with rage and entitlement, boomed through the wood. He screamed my name. He screamed about family obligations. He demanded I open the door and show some respect. My mother wailed louder, a practiced, theatrical cry designed to make me feel like a monster. Years ago, that sound would have broken me. I would have opened the door, swallowed my boundaries, and let them consume my peace just to stop the noise. But today, I was the one holding the hammer. I did not argue through the glass. I did not plead with them to leave. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and opened my security camera application. The high-definition night vision feed from my porch camera displayed perfectly on the screen. There was my father, drill in hand, face red with fury. There was my mother, faking a breakdown. I tapped the share button. I selected the Bennett Extended Family Network group, a massive social circle containing 40 aunts, uncles, and cousins who all worshipped my parents' carefully crafted image of the perfect, loving family. I typed a single clinical sentence: Derek and Catherine Bennett attempting to break into my home after giving Vanessa their entire retirement fund. I hit the button to take the camera feed live. I stood in the dark hallway and watched the viewer count tick upward. 5 people, 12 people, 28 people. I watched my aunt's name pop up. I saw my grandfather's profile picture join the stream. My parents' darkest, most humiliating secret was now broadcasting in real time to the exact people whose opinions they valued more than oxygen. Stripped of their ability to control the narrative, their private abuse was suddenly a public spectacle. The power of weaponized transparency is absolute. Without waiting for a single comment, I closed the social media app, opened my dialer, and called 911. The flashing blue and red lights of a county sheriff cruiser washed over the pine trees exactly 14 minutes later. The heavy diesel engine of the moving truck idled loudly as Officer Marcus stepped out of his vehicle. He was tall, unsmiling, and moved with the deliberate, unhurried pace of a man who had seen every flavor of domestic manipulation. The moment the cruiser door slammed, my father dropped the drill. His posture instantly transformed. The aggressive, entitled invader vanished, replaced by a smooth, respectful, concerned patriarch. He stepped toward the officer with his hands raised in a gesture of harmlessness. He's phona rapide. Desperate lie. He claimed I was having a severe mental episode, that I had locked myself inside, and that they were simply a terrified family trying to perform a welfare check on an unstable daughter. I unlocked the deadbolt and stepped out onto the porch. The freezing morning air bit at my face. I bypassed my parents entirely. I did not look at my mother's fake tears, and I did not acknowledge my father's glaring eyes. I walked straight down the steps and handed Officer Marcus a thick, heavy plastic binder. Inside was the notarized property deed proving I was the sole owner of the cabin, a printed copy of my property tax receipts, and my phone, which was currently replaying the high-definition footage of my father attempting to drill through my locks. The evidence was absolute. Officer Marcus reviewed the documents in total silence. He handed the binder back to me, adjusted his duty belt, and turned to my father. The officer's voice was a brick wall of legal procedure. He informed Derek and Catherine that they had exactly 0 legal right to the property, that they were actively committing attempted breaking and entering, and that if they did not get back into their vehicles and leave the mountain immediately, they would leave in handcuffs. My father's jaw clenched. The respectable facade crumbled, leaving only the humiliated panic of a man who had finally hit a boundary he could not bully his way through. My mother gasped, realizing her tears held absolutely no currency here. From the warmth of her luxury vehicle, Vanessa watched the officer rest his hand on his radio. She threw the vehicle into reverse, tires spinning against the gravel, and sped down the mountain road, abandoning our parents without a second thought. Defeated, my father shoved his drill into his coat pocket. He grabbed my mother's arm, pulled her into the cab of the moving truck, and drove away. The driveway was clear. The morning was silent. But I knew toxic families do not simply surrender. They regroup, and they retaliate. 3 days later, the retaliation arrived. I was in the middle of a grueling hospital shift, charting medications at the nurse's station, when my phone vibrated. It was my neighbor. He spoke fast, shouting over a deafening, rhythmic crashing sound in the background. A heavy demolition crew was currently taking sledgehammers to my beautiful wraparound cedar porch. I sprinted to my car and drove the mountain curves faster than I ever have in my life. When I pulled into my driveway, the destruction was staggering. Half of the porch was reduced to splintered wood and exposed nails. 3 men in hard hats were swinging heavy mallets against the support beams. I slammed my car door and screamed at them to stop. The crew leader, a burly man named Mike, lowered his sledgehammer, wiping sweat from his forehead. He looked at me with genuine confusion. He claimed he was hired by Morgan Bennett. He pulled out his tablet and showed me the digital work order from a premium local contractor application. The reality of the trap clicked into place with sickening clarity. Vanessa's influencer retreat was bleeding money. Her launch was a total failure, and she was desperate for cash and viral sympathy. She had hired this crew to destroy my property, planning to return later, film the wreckage, and blame it on my toxic, jealous neighbors. It was a calculated ploy to launch a victim narrative, start a crowdfunding campaign, and farm pity subscriptions. But to hire an expensive demolition crew on a bonded application, you need to pass strict identity verification. You cannot just use a fake name. I demanded to know how the account was verified. Mike opened the application history. There, on the screen, was a photograph of my state driver's license. The memory hit me instantly. Last Thanksgiving, during a brief, tense family visit, my wallet had gone missing from the kitchen counter for 20 minutes. Vanessa had secretly photographed my identification. She used that stolen photo to pass the application's verification process. And she funded the massive crew deposit using a fraudulent prepaid debit card registered under my name and social security number. She thought she was being clever. She thought she was executing a petty, untraceable revenge. Instead, she had just handed me the rope to hang her. Mike, the crew leader, realized the gravity of the situation immediately. The color drained from his face as he realized he had been duped into committing severe, documented property damage, panicked about losing his contractor's license and facing civil lawsuits. His self-preservation kicked into overdrive. He did not argue. He did not try to negotiate. He stood in the middle of the splintered wood and explicitly stated he was driving straight to the police precinct. He voluntarily forwarded me the entire application chat log, the digital payment receipts, and the IP address login history straight to my email. He recorded a quick video on my phone. stating his company was hired under false pretenses by someone claiming to be me. He packed up his crew and drove down the mountain to file his own fraud report. He became my strongest witness. I stood in the wreckage of my front yard, holding all the digital receipts. The mountain wind howled through the trees. I opened my phone and dialed Vanessa's number. She answered on the second ring. Her voice dripped with an arrogant, sickeningly sweet smugness. She asked how my day was going, clearly waiting for me to scream, waiting for me to cry about the porch so she could record my reaction. I did not scream. I did not raise my voice a single decibel. I kept my tone dead, flat, and completely devoid of emotion. I told her I was having a great day. I told her I was just standing in my driveway, reviewing the digital receipts from the demolition crew. I heard the sharp intake of her breath. The silence on the line grew incredibly heavy. I read aloud the digital payment confirmation numbers. I read the IP address locations, and then I read her the specific federal case numbers for the charges of aggravated identity theft and wire fraud that were currently being filed by the crew leader and the authorities. The smugness vanished from her voice, replaced by a raw, trembling panic. She stammered. She tried to deny it. She tried to say it was just a prank. I hung up the phone. The legal and financial fallout was swift, brutal, and an absolute. When you commit federal fraud, the consequences do not wait for a courtroom. Because of the pending felony charges and the massive police investigation, strict morality clauses in Vanessa's life were instantly triggered. The luxury vehicle dealership received an alert regarding the fraud linked to her accounts. They legally voided her lease and repossessed the vehicle from her driveway in the middle of the night. But the true devastation landed on the commercial lease for her fake influencer retreat. Commercial real estate contracts for premium properties are ruthless. Vanessa's lease contained a strict acceleration clause. The moment the fraud charges became public record, the morality default legally activated that clause. The property management company did not just evict her. They demanded the entire 5-year rent balance immediately. Vanessa's fake empire evaporated into thin air. And because my parents, Derek and Catherine, had eagerly signed as the sole financial guarantors, they were caught in the blast radius. They were hit with an unavoidable, insurmountable corporate debt overnight. They had drained their retirement to secure a future for their golden child. And their golden child had used it to buy them a permanent, inescapable bankruptcy. 7 months later, the justice became official. I sat in the back row of a sterile county courtroom and watched the judge drop the gavel. Vanessa was sentenced to 4 years in state prison for the wire fraud and identity theft, with the court ordering full financial restitution for the damages to my property. The local community response was swift and merciless. My parents were shunned by the extended family, ousted from their neighborhood associations, and forced to move into a tiny, rundown rental apartment 2 towns over, entirely consumed by the massive debt they had guaranteed. They had lost their reputation, their retirement, and their favorite child. 2 weeks after the sentencing, the final manipulation attempt arrived. I walked out to my mailbox and found a thick, handwritten envelope. The return address was the state correctional facility. Inside was a letter from Vanessa, heavily stained with tears, begging for forgiveness. She wrote about how we were blood, how she did it all out of desperation, how our parents were suffering, and how I needed to drop the civil restitution charges because I was still her sister. Accompanying it was a frantic voicemail from my mother, sobbing into the phone, demanding I visit Vanessa and fix the family. I stood on my beautifully rebuilt cedar porch, feeling the warm afternoon sun on my face. I looked at the letter. I listened to the voicemail. I did not feel a single spike of anger. I felt absolutely nothing. I dropped the letter directly into the outdoor recycling bin. I deleted the voicemail without listening to the end. I blocked the number. The hollow echoes of their manipulation could no longer reach me. Later that evening, my driveway filled with cars again. But this time, it was not a moving truck. It was my chosen family. 3 of my closest friends from the hospital. The trauma surgeons and fellow nurses who had stood by me through the darkest nights arrived carrying groceries, wine, and laughter. We grilled steaks on the new porch. We told stories. We filled the mountain air with genuine warmth and mutual respect. Looking around the table, seeing the faces of people who loved me for who I was, not for what they could extract from me. I finally understood the profound difference between sharing a bloodline and sharing a life. The chaos of my past was dead. The peace of my present was impenetrable. If you are watching this and you feel the crushing weight of a family that only sees you as a resource, I need you to listen very closely to the psychology of what just happened. Toxic family systems, especially those built around a golden child and an enabler parent, rely entirely on the silent suffering of the responsible sibling. They survive by convincing you that your boundaries are acts of betrayal. They are not. Through this nightmare, I learned 3 unbreakable rules about surviving a narcissistic family. Rule number 1 is recognizing the false currency of guilt. Toxic people will constantly attempt to hand you a bill for debts you never incurred. Guilt is not a moral obligation. It is a control tactic utilized by individuals who have bankrupted their own lives and need you to fund their consequences. Do not accept the invoice. Rule number 2 is understanding that boundaries require enforcement, not explanations. You do not need to justify protecting your sanctuary, your finances, or your mental health to people who feel aggressively entitled to destroy them. Explaining your boundaries to a manipulator only gives them a map of your vulnerabilities. You do not negotiate with invaders. You lock the door. Rule number 3 is accepting the ultimate price of peace. The hardest truth you will ever swallow is that setting yourself free means accepting that you will forever be the villain in a toxic person's narrative. They will lie about you. They will play the victim. They will tell the entire world that you are cold and selfish, letting them believe that and being perfectly fine with it is the price of admission to a peaceful life. Blood does not make you family. Loyalty, respect, and reciprocal care make you family. You are completely allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, manipulate you, and view your success as their personal safety net. Even if you share a last name, trust is earned, not owed by default of birth. How much of your own future, your own joy, and your own hard-earned stability are you currently setting on fire just to keep a toxic family member warm? If you are tired of holding the match, share this story. Let it be the definitive sign you have been waiting for. It is time to put the fire out. I am Morgan Bennett, and for the first time in my entire life, I am entirely free. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are sitting there thinking, why did it take her so long? Why did Morgan endure years of being treated like a second-class citizen And why didn't she cut her parents off the minute they started draining their retirement to fund Vanessa's delusions? Let me stop you right there. Morgan was not weak, and she certainly was not stupid. What she experienced for the first 34 years of her life is a psychological trap called the slot machine effect, officially known as intermittent reinforcement. Toxic families operate exactly like rigged casinos. 99% of the time, they drain your energy, disrespect your boundaries, and demand your money. But every once in a while, they give you a tiny payout. A rare compliment, a quiet Thanksgiving dinner, a moment where they actually act like parents. You become addicted to those little crumbs of hope, constantly pulling the lever, waiting for the jackpot of a normal family that is never going to come. Morgan did not lose her mind on that porch. She simply realized the game was rigged and walked out of the casino. Now, let us transition from the psychology to the practical toolkit. Morgan executed a masterclass in street smart financial defense. And there are 3 specific moves you need to copy if you ever face a similar nightmare. First, building the case. When Morgan's father tried to break down her door, she did not waste her breath arguing with a narcissist. Toxic people want you to scream because it makes you look like the crazy one. Instead, Morgan handed a pre-printed binder of notarized deeds to the police and live-streamed the crime to the entire extended family. Manipulators thrive in the shadows. Sunlight is the ultimate disinfectant. Document everything and keep your receipts ready. Second, the audit strategy. When her sister Vanessa destroyed the front porch, Morgan did not just get angry. She got the data. Scammers absolutely hate details. Morgan went straight to the demolition crew leader and secured the digital work orders, the IP addresses, and the payment confirmations. When you audit a toxic person's actions with cold, hard digital evidence, their emotional manipulation instantly collapses under the weight of federal law. Finally, the buyout. Sometimes the best financial defense is stepping out of the way and letting the trash take itself out. Morgan did not try to save her parents from the commercial lease acceleration clause. She let the fraud charges trigger the morality default, allowing the corporate landlord to liquidate Vanessa's empire. Morgan bought her permanent freedom by simply refusing to be their financial safety net. Here is the verdict. You cannot heal in the same environment that made you sick. And you cannot build generational wealth if you are constantly funding someone else's dysfunction. You are the chief executive officer of your own life. It is time to fire the bad employees. Even if you share DNA, have you ever had to draw a hard financial boundary with a family member? Drop your story in the comments below. We read every single one. Hit subscribe to keep leveling up your life. And remember, protect your peace and protect your assets.